I assure you that Landon Jackson is not just the next AJ Epenesa. I'm going to break that down for you and more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control our discussion. We got some great stuff to get into. Veteran winners and losers coming out of the draft. And, of course, clarifying why Landon Jackson is not just the next AJ Epenesa. Great question about Josh Palmer and Curtis Samuel, Josh Allen's mental growth, rookie camp, and more here today on Locked On Bills. Let's start with this one from Matthew. Matthew says, what are some of the winners and or losers from the draft on the Bills' current roster? For example, Cam Lewis's roster spot seems like it could be challenged, while Balin Spector's may not. It's a good question here from Matthew. And I did the inventory, and I have a couple of winners and several losers, and I'll share those with you right now. My number one winner in terms of a veteran winner is Dorian Williams. Dorian Williams is positioned very well in the case that this is Matt Milano's final season in Buffalo to succeed him in 2026. It'll be the last year of his rookie deal. He'll have 3 years of experience in the system. He'll have some good game experience as well. And I think it would be difficult for some other draft pick to come in 2026 and take his job, or even for the Bills to sign an outside free agent and not give Dorian Williams that opportunity to be the successor to Matt Milano. So I look at Dorian Williams as a big-time winner in terms of what happened in the draft. And I think you can point to all of the depth linebackers. Balin Spector, Matthew pointed out in the question, I think is a good, really good choice. The Bills didn't draft any linebackers. They only added one as a UDFA. As I've said repeatedly, the same 6 guys that finished the season on the roster are the same 6 guys that are still around, plus one UDFA. So Balin Spector seems like that was a big win for him. I think you can apply the same thought process to Joe Andreessen and Edefwan Ulofoshio. Andreessen, a UDFA entering year 2. Ulofoshio, a day 3 pick that we didn't learn much about as a rookie. And so I think all of those guys have to feel real good right now about their status on this roster. And in the case of Dorian Williams, not only his status on the roster, which never was really in question, but that pathway to becoming a starter for this team. The other veteran that I look at as a winner is punter Brad Robbins. And the Bills didn't draft a punter. I thought there was a chance they could. Interestingly enough, only one punter got drafted in the entire draft. But if the Bills drafted a punter, I think Brad Robbins would probably be cut already. Because you're not going to have 3 punters on your roster, even if it's a 91-man roster for the Bills during the offseason. You're going to have that guy compete with Jake Camarda. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Bills playing at punter later in this episode. But Brad Robbins is hanging around as a guy that has a chance to compete with Jake Camarda to win the job. Both guys drafted punters in recent years. Both guys fell out of favor with the team that drafted them. And we'll see who wins the job. But Brad Robbins still in the mix, where if the Bills drafted a punter, I don't think that would be the case. When it comes to losers, I had a lot more of those than winners, and I think that speaks to exactly what you want to feel coming out of a draft. You want to look at your roster and say, boy, things are going to be dicey for that guy because they might have just drafted his replacement. or they may have just made that player's path to the roster more difficult. And I think, Matthew, you call out a great name in Cam Lewis. And I kind of want to lump together Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson, and Jamarcus Ingram. All guys that have made this team. All guys that have also been released by this team, right? But when you look at guys like Jordan Hancock, Bill's 5th-round pick, his versatility to play safety, to play in the slot, should be a good special teams player. You've heard some really nice commentary since the draft about how much the Bills' collective scouting staff really liked Jordan Hancock. I think they're going to want to give him every opportunity to have a role here, which is probably bad news for Lewis, Ingram, or Jackson. And I think you can also mention the drafting of Dorian Strong, 6th-round pick, but 4-year rookie deal. You don't want to lose control of that to hang on to Dane Jackson potentially, right? So I think you look at Hancock and Strong, and those look like players that directly interfere with guys like Lewis, Ingram, and Jackson. Now, interestingly enough, I did my 53-man roster projection earlier this week, and I had Strong, Ingram, and Lewis making it in addition to Hancock. So Jackson was the only one that didn't stick around. But I think all of those players are on notice. Young players with athletic upside, experienced guys coming out of college. They project well to special teams. I think those guys really stand out in terms of losers. I'd also invoke Zach Davidson. Zach Davidson prior to the draft was really uncompeted with to be the tight end 3 behind Kincaid and Knox. Well, the drafting of Jackson Hawes certainly affects that for Davidson, and Davidson will be able to go into camp and say, I have a much better receiving profile than Hawes, and he'll be right about that. But I think as a tight end 3, it's the inline ability that matters a lot more. The special teams ability that matters a lot more. And I think Hawes is going to stiff arm Davidson. I think you can look at Ryan Vandemark as potentially a veteran loser. It's going to be an interesting battle between him and Chase Lunt, the Bills' 7th-round pick. I've convinced myself that Vandemark will be the guy that wins the job. The Bills have been committed to him for 3 years. He's been the swing tackle in 2023. He started a game last year and held his head above water. He's got a much more appealing size and athleticism profile than Chase Lunt. But Chase Lunt's the new name. 4 years of cost control on a rookie deal. That's at least an interesting competition. And then one more guy I'll invoke is AJ Epenesa. I'm not entirely convinced that AJ Epenesa won't make this roster. But the arrival of Landon Jackson at least makes it a conversation, particularly if the Bills could trade Epenesa, where there would be a major cap benefit if the Bills were able to pull off a trade, where the Bills would get, I think, like a little over $6 million in cap space this year, with a little bit of dead cap, like around $1 million this year and just under $3 million next year. But you get the 6.2 in relief now, and you might feel good about your edge rotation, and the presence of Landon Jackson might make AJ Epenesa expendable. So, losers: Cam Lewis, Jamarcus Ingram, Dane Jackson, Zach Davidson, Ryan Vandemark, and AJ Epenesa. Next one today comes from Michael. Michael says, AJ Epenesa and Landon Jackson seem like similar players. What are the differences between them? What does one do well that the other doesn't, and vice versa? It's a good question. I think they are stylistically similar players. I think that is true. But in Jackson, you get a lot more length and a lot more explosiveness. Epenesa at the combine was 6'5", 275 with a wingspan of 81.25 inches. Landon Jackson is 6'6", 264, wingspan of 83 5/8 inches. So you have relatively the same height and weight, but I get a little more than 2 inches of extra wingspan on Jackson, and these are long arm, heavy hands, compression style players. So you have a more appealing size profile in Jackson, but the athletic profile is really where Jackson offers a lot more. The explosiveness, not really similar at all. Epenesa, in terms of explosive metrics, 5.04 in the 40-yard dash. Jackson, 4.68. Epenesa, 32.5-inch vertical jump. Jackson, 40.5-inch vertical jump. Epenesa, 117-inch broad jump. Jackson, 129-inch broad jump. I mean, we're talking about different stratospheres of athletes. So stylistically similar. Way more explosiveness, way more length, way more suddenness from Landon Jackson. And so you might be thinking, well, okay, that sounds cool, Joe, but, we're talking about Epenesa, who's like a mid-second round pick, and Jackson goes 71. Epenesa was the 54th pick. Jackson was the 71st pick. Make it make sense. Well, it speaks to the classes that they were in. We talked about how the depth of this year's edge class was going to push players down, and that's exactly what happened to Landon Jackson. Epenesa was the 5th edge player drafted his year. 5th. It was Chase Young, Caleb Chason, Darrell Taylor, and then Epenesa. Maybe he was the 4th. He's the 4th one drafted. Landon Jackson was the 11th edge. Just night and day differences in the classes. And this is exactly like a perfect example of what we were trying to say when, you're going to get edge rushers a little later than you normally could. And that's exactly what the Bills were able to take advantage of in the drafting of Landon Jackson. So more length, more explosiveness out of Jackson. And I think, Epenesa came into the league and you thought to yourself, is he maxed out? Is he maxed out, right? You started that process potentially, first round pick maybe. And then you're like, I don't know. I think he's kind of the same guy. I worry about the athleticism. With Landon Jackson, it's been, like an ascending player. And Chris Trapasso and I talked about that yesterday on the podcast. So I'm really excited about the ceiling that exists with Landon Jackson compared to Epenesa, even if stylistically there are some similarities. All right, folks, on the other side of it, good question here on Josh Palmer and Curtis Samuel. We'll do that here next. Be sure to stick with me. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I love using Game Time. Well, it's the priority. You get last-minute deals. You can really do save 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you. And the all-in pricing means you never have surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, welcome back. Quick reminder to you that we have Bill Squad, a new piece of content that we launched here in the Locked On Bills feed. You still get the daily podcast from me like you always have. That'll never change, but we've added 2 weekly episodes, Bill Squad. They air live at noon Eastern time on the YouTube channel, the Locked On Bills YouTube channel, Mondays and Thursdays, live at noon Eastern time. It's myself, Jeremy White, and Jerry Ostrowski. And our content for Thursday, we got some good conversations lined up, some Dalton Kincaid chatter. People are going nuts over this picture. We got to talk about that and just forecast him into next season. I'm excited to see where Jeremy and Jerry are at on Kincaid. And then, Gabe Davis got released by the Jaguars 1 year into that deal. They ate a bunch of guaranteed money to get rid of Gabe Davis. Should he come back to Buffalo? You probably know where I stand on that, but we'll break that down and a whole lot more on Bill Squad. Again, Thursday at noon, Monday at noon on the Locked On Bills YouTube channel. We've also started to incorporate interacting with the comment section. So come on there, ask a question, and we'll dedicate some time as well to answering your questions. All right, next up comes from Tommy. Tommy says, I'm really hyped for Josh Palmer. Most of my opinions are based off of your analysis, but I truly believe he was a good choice, and I would not be surprised if he didn't exceed or at least meet expectations. Is there a particular quality you see in him that is superior to Curtis Samuel in the context of a wide receiver 3-4 role for this offense? Or is it safe to assume that Samuel would have lived up to expectations without the turf toe? I know this topic has been explored on the pod repeatedly, but I'm particularly interested in your comparisons of them in the same sort of role. It's a good question here. And I look at Josh Palmer as a much more complete player. A guy that you can keep on the field for a high percentage of snaps and really do a lot of different things, where Samuel is much more of a specialized player. I don't want to put Curtis Samuel in an Isaiah McKenzie bucket, but you know what I mean? It is a specialized role that he would fulfill, where there's a much more traditional role that you would get from a Josh Palmer. So I think you're going to get a lot more snaps out of a Palmer, where Samuel is more of an X factor. With Josh Palmer, I think you got a guy that can play on the outside. You have a 3-level route runner. You got a guy with good size and physicality. He's going to block. He's a true route technician. Where Samuel, you're going to play him in the slot. You're going to play him in the backfield, right? There's a lot of versatility with alignment. Good yards after catch guy. You're going to want to get him the ball quick and ask him to create. You're going to want to use him on shallows and runaway routes. That type of stuff. He's not going to offer the physical components. He's not going to offer as much as a blocker. Not really a ball skills guy down the field. So really stylistically different players, where I think you're going to get a lot more run out of Palmer, but you're going to get some intriguing specialization out of Samuel. So hopefully that would really kind of put them into the different buckets and how they can help the team. And I think the Bills will once again be very multiple with their personnel groupings, not just personnel packages in terms of 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets, 4 wide receivers, whatever. That's not what I really mean. I mean, within those personnel groupings, different players. Like you could be in a 3 wide receiver set, and those 3 receivers could be Coleman, Shakir, and Palmer, but they could also be Shakir, Moore, and Samuel, right? Like there's so many different ways to play offense with the different skill sets. So I stop short of numbering these guys. I think your wide receiver 1 is, I guess, Khalil Shakir, but it's more about skill sets, how they all work together, and what you want to accomplish against a certain defense. And I like the versatility that the Bills have up and down their wide receiver core and throughout their offensive weapons. Next one's from Bills WZA, who says, I was pleased to hear that Josh Allen's offseason work is focused on reading the defense pre-snap. I've been thinking about this because it seemed that reading the defense was an issue at the end of both Chiefs games last season. In the regular season game, it was reported that the Bills misread if the defense was in man or zone before Josh put the cape on to run it in for the game-winning touchdown. In the playoff game, it was reported that the Bills didn't have the right protection for the Chiefs blitz, which led to Josh having to heave up a prayer that Kincaid couldn't haul in. Do these instances point to pre-snap reads being a significant issue to the Bills for them to improve upon, or is this just a matter of Steve Spagnuolo being a genius and there's not much that you can do? It's a good question here. And I'd say that you make 2 good call-outs, and ultimately scheme wins happen, right? They do. Nothing, I think, with either of those plays pre-snap would have led you to believe something different or for you to make a certain check. I think Josh generally does make good checks, makes good adjustments on the line, makes good protection calls, and it leads to a lot of plays that we say, oh yeah, Josh did that, right? But when it's the other side of the coin where the Bills get got, it's, it gets a different type of response, right? Because it's a lot more normal for it to work. And I think ultimately other guys are really good too. You mentioned Spags, and is he just a genius? Yeah, I think Spags is probably on the Mount Rushmore of defensive coordinators in league history with what he's done with Kansas City, game plans and huge moments, the Giants and the Super Bowls that they won over the Patriots. I mean, this guy's done some crazy good stuff in the NFL. And so in those moments, he's just traditionally has got a great call. And so I think in both of those instances, the Bills had called a play where they thought they were going to get man, they get zone, and then Josh puts the cape on. In the other play, the 4th and 5 against Kansas City in the AFC Championship game, yeah, the protection should have went the other way, but I'm not sure what pre-snap would have told you that. They wind up with a pretty balanced look, and then they overload one side because they take the outside slot corner and they send 2 through the B gap, and Osiris Torrance goes the other way. It's like, what do you do? It's unfortunate, right? And that's one of the great things about Josh Allen is he can make you right when you're wrong. And he did in the first Chiefs game, and I'll be honest, he did in the second one. Kincaid's got to catch a ball. Got to catch that ball. But I think ultimately I'm with you in that I am pleased to hear that this is what he's focused in on, because I think that's where he's at in his career. It's the physical improvements probably not really going to happen. Maybe there's some mechanical adjustments here and there, some tweaks that he has to be mindful of, but for Josh Allen, it is about the mental side, winning with pre-snap, winning with processing, making sure that your eyes are in the right place to start a progression. Because physical decline is inevitably going to happen for every player, and Josh Allen won't be immune to that. Where he can pick up the slack is on the mental side of things. So I think he's focused on the right stuff. I really do. This next one, comes from Adam, who says, I'm just wondering what the Bills' rookie minicamp might look like this year. Since we mostly drafted defense, what kind of offense do they field for a rookie minicamp? Do they bring in guys off the street for camp? So yeah, they do to an extent. So you have your draft class that will be there. You also have your undrafted free agent class. And so within that, the Bills have 3 receivers, a tight end, and 2 offensive linemen. Then you're going to have a lot of players that are tryout players that are rookies. And last year, the Bills had 23 tryout rookies. So you'll have, I would guess, every bit of 20 of those to help fill out an offensive roster. And then you can also have 5 unsigned veterans, guys that are not under contract with any team that are street free agents that can come in and participate in rookie camp on a tryout basis. And last year, the Bills had 3 of those, a couple of corners and a quarterback. So I think you'll see something similar this year because, rookie camp is the end of this week. I think it's May 9th it starts. And so you'll get, prior to that happening, we'll get all the rookie numbers, and then you'll get a rookie camp roster sheet that will list all the tryout players. And then I would guess there's probably at least a few of the veteran players that are there to try out throughout the rookie camp. So that's how you'll get through the rookie camp. All right, coming up next, we're going to get into a difficult part of that 53-man roster projection, the punter situation, and someone had a question about my background in football. So we'll get into that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I've been enjoying the over-unders, whether it's game point totals, player point projections. It's made these playoffs even more exciting. Which players are showing you that they're showing up in the biggest moments? How could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? If you got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, welcome back. Next one today comes from Dave, who says, in your 53-man roster projection, you said that the most difficult decision would be at corner and safety. What about defensive tackle? Not to start the year, but when Ogunjobi will be back, you'll have a really tough decision to make if you only keep 5 with Oliver, Jones, Carter, Sanders, and Walker. Even if he's a project, I don't expect Walker to be bumped off this roster as a 4th-round pick. Yeah, I agree with you, Dave, and I talked about that where you got some stuff to figure out when Ogunjobi comes back. And I think what you'll do is see what the landscape looks like. You could have an injury at the position that makes it an easy call. Somebody gets actually hurt. Okay, you go to IR. Larry Ogunjobi, you're on this roster. And then there's also, hint, hint, wink, wink, an injury that could happen. Dwayne Carter could stub his toe, have to go on injured reserve. Deion Walker just might have a little back soreness. Put him on injured reserve. Whatever player. So I think the Bills will find a way to finesse that. But I think you just look at the landscape at the time. Maybe you do have a legit injury. Maybe there's a player that's not quite playing that well, and you got a calf strain that they need to work out for a few weeks and go on IR. I think you figure it out that way and assess the landscape after 6 games when Ogunjobi's ready to come back. Dan says, with the punter situation being what it is, are we overlooking the impact of losing Sam Martin? I remember the excitement for the punt god a few years back, and after watching Matt Hawk and Bojo was Corey Bojorquez struggle and give opposing teams excellent field position. If neither of the options pan out, are there any free agent targets or UDFAs you'd like to see added? I think it's a fair question, and I don't want to sit here and dog on Sam Martin because I think he's been a perfectly fine punter. But I think that's the reality. He's just a fine punter. In fact, last season he was not very good statistically. He was 24th in expected points added per punt, 24th in the league. So that feels like a very upgradable position for a guy that was bottom 25% of the league in EPA and is 35 years old, and you get $2 million in cap savings from moving on. So I understand the decision, but you certainly don't look at this competition of Jake Camarda and Brad Robbins and feel like, boy, you got some exciting young options. You got some young options that at one point might have been exciting, but need to prove themselves. Camarda, 2 years of good play after being a 4th-round pick, and was so bad in year 3, they cut him, and he never got another chance last year. Brad Robbins, I will tell you, was the worst punter in the NFL in 2023, comfortably. And so you hope that one of these guys who were recent draft picks that are young can get it going. You've seen this before. It's not like an uncommon thing where a player is young, they get a chance with a team, it doesn't go well, then they go somewhere else and they figure it out, right? I think you got 2 guys with urgency to get their careers together. There's only 32 people in the world that are making NFL money punting footballs, right? You better get it together. So I think you like that dynamic of what's at stake for Camarda and Robbins, and hopefully one of them can hit. And if not, you got to figure it out. But I understand moving on from Martin. Next one today comes from Chris. Chris says, I've got a bit of a different question than what you normally get for herd mentality, but I don't think I've ever come across this info. What is your background when it comes to football and how you've developed such a broad yet nuanced understanding of the game? Is it through playing, coaching, or something else? You offer a very unique perspective and level of insights that is hard to find in sports media, whether at a team level or down to individual positions and techniques. And I'm curious to see how you've been able to develop this expertise. I appreciate this question. And if you ever have questions like this, I welcome them. I feel like I've been doing this podcast daily since January of 2019. And early on there, I feel like I talked about this type of stuff a lot, and I've probably since then not as much. So if there's something curious, I like to think I'm a pretty transparent person. So I'm happy to answer these questions. So let me answer the question for you. I think it starts with growing up in a football loving house. My father, I have 2 brothers, so I'm one of 3 boys in the house, and football knowledge was huge, especially with my older brother, where he's almost 7 years older than me. And I was always so jealous of how much he knew about sports and in particular football. And so I wanted to know as much as I could so that way I can, hold my own talking football with my brother. And so that thirst for knowledge, put me in a position where I wanted to consume everything that I possibly could. And then, of course, I played football. All 3 of us did. My brothers all played. My younger brother was probably the best football player of us all. And had some great opportunities to play college ball, and he's instead chose to be a missionary. And of course, he doesn't regret that decision, but he's a really good football player. My older brother actually played in college, was a 3-year team captain at Wingate University, actually under Joe Reich, Frank Reich's brother. And I played middle school and high school ball. I had chances to play in college. I did not follow through with those, and I deeply regret that. But, playing football, knowledge in my family, that really kind of set the foundation early on. But then as I got older, I always wanted to be in football media. This is what I've always wanted to do. And I thought as part of my journey to having an opportunity to work in football media that I needed to know the game. And every step that I've taken to this point in my journey, I've been very measured and very calculated about the steps that I've taken to get here. And in kind of plotting my path, I did a lot of observing and realizing that there's different types of people in this space. You've got reporters, people that are insiders and report information. You've got interviewers, people that are able to sit down and talk with players and coaches and really get to the meat of stuff, which I think is cool. You have people that discuss narratives and trends. And then you have people that break down the game, that break down football. And that's where I wanted to slot. I felt like that was the place that would be best for me. And so I figured if I was going to do that, then I needed to commit to being a student of the game. And I've done that. I've committed deeply to becoming a student of the game. And I've done a lot of different things. I would say number one is networking and asking questions. Football people like to talk about football. And so I would try to come up with good questions and ask people that I thought were smarter than me or, played at the next level or coaches, they're willing to help and share. Like, people that love football are passionate about football, and they're passionate about sharing their knowledge. And so I learned a ton simply by networking, getting to know people, and then being willing to ask them questions. I would say also coaching clinics. There are coaching clinics that you can attend. There are a lot of coaching clinics online where you can watch coaches in the NFL, in college, break down anything. I'll sit there and watch the Virginia Tech's corners coach talk about press coverage technique. Or I've watched Aaron Cromer break down offensive line play. Or so many of these. Dabo Swinney talking about passing game concepts. Whatever. There's been so many of these that I've watched. And so I try to consume as much of that as I possibly can, and have for a long time. So it's not like I just started doing this. I've been doing this for like at least a decade, just trying to consume these coaching clinics. There's a lot of books and resources out there that you can read. There's a lot of good content, even on YouTube. I learned a lot from watching the QB School with JT O'Sullivan. So it's networking, it's coaching clinics, it's books, it's the content that's available out there, and staying committed to it, and staying committed to it over a long period of time. And every year I've tried to commit to enhancing my knowledge of something very specific about football in the offseason. And there's been years where that was passing game concepts, offensive line play, linebacker play was something I was like, I want to learn more about this and what these guys are supposed to do. Pressure schemes, coverage techniques, schematic trends. And so I just try to focus in on something at least every year to really get better with my knowledge. And there are tons of great resources out there. And I think I've been very committed to learning. And I'll tell you what, the more I learn, the more I realize I've got a lot to learn. And so it's this never-ending search and quest for knowledge that I think makes me better at my job and helps me love this game, right? It's such a simple, complex game. It's the best way to put it. And I've been a student of it for a very, very long time. I would guess, I playing football until I was 18 years old, and then never stopped. I had careers in other fields, but while I was working those other jobs, the only thing I ever wanted to do was talk about football and write about football. And through that, I just learned and learned and learned and learned and learned through those various resources. And that hadn't stopped today. And if anything, it's the pedals smashed even harder today than it was 20 years ago. And so I guess that's kind of how I've plotted my path, and something that's always been important to me. I wanted to feel like I was somebody that knew what I was talking about. And, you commit so much like emotional energy to football, right? We do. We love the Bills, right? We love the Bills. And you commit a lot of emotional energy to it. And if I'm going to commit that type of emotional energy, for me, it's like, I got to be able to know like the reality of what's going on. And that's why you'll hear me say, even after the Bills lose a game, like, for me, the therapy is in the tape. And people get it from other places. Like, maybe for you, that's having banter on social media and debating what happened in the game. For me, it's like, I just want to watch the film. And that's why everything I do like goes back to film. Want to talk about a draft prospect? All right, what does the film tell you about him? And so I just feel like that's where the answers are. That's what I cling to. And I want to know what I'm looking at. I want to know bad. If I'm going to have this type of emotional energy, if the results of a football game that I have zero control over are going to affect me emotionally, I want to know what the heck's going on. So that's part of what fuels me, in addition to, the career that I have. And this always wanted to be exactly the path that I took. So I don't take anything for granted. It's important to me. And I attack this line of work like I have something to lose. I don't want to go do another job. I don't want to ever again. And so I think continuing to learn and be a student is going to help me stay here for as long as possible. So hopefully that was a good, candid, vulnerable answer for you as to how I've learned the game and how I plan to keep learning this game. All right, folks, that's going to be it for us today. Come on by for Bills Squad Live Thursday, noon Eastern time on the Locked On Bills YouTube channel. And then, of course, we'll have a Friday episode of Locked On Bills for you. Don't miss anything. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.